Right everybody, this, amazingly, is the last video I'm going to do on coasts because we've covered the syllabus, you've done the test, we've been through the answers, and just as we always do at the end of each module, we're going to have a look at some exam questions so that you can begin to get a sense of, okay, yes, I've studied the coast module, how on earth are they going to test me on this? What am I going to have to do? So this is a Word document that you will find in the Coasts folder. It's called Coasts Exam Questions, and it accompanies pages 63 onwards of your module booklet. Okay, so apologies to students in my classes who have probably heard far too much of the basic stuff, but I will just remind you because it's easy to forget. Yes, obviously, doing well in geography involves you knowing geography. That's kind of obvious. But the other thing that will really help you, not just in geography, but in all of your subjects, is getting to grips with exam technique. Some people find that a lot easier than others. So I've started this Word document with just my very simple advice about tackling exam questions. So you've got to pay attention to the command word. Because if you think of what a command is, if you were in the forces, all right, and you are commanded to do something, if you didn't do it, you would be in serious trouble. Now, it's not going to be quite so severe for an exam question, but I just want to really emphasise to you that you have to pay attention to the command word of the question, all right? That's just the most important thing. Trip hazards. I'll pick up on these as we go through. Trip hazards are things that could catch you out if you're not careful. So for example, let's say there was a question about coastal processes and you only talked about one process, you're going to limit the number of marks you get because you're not talking about processes. So it's little things that could just trip you up if you're not careful. And it's really important to pay attention to how many marks the question is, because for your exam board, the way you approach the question completely changes between 6 or less and 7 or more. All right, and I'm not going to go through what it says on there because you can all read, but that is a really fundamental thing for you to remember. Clearly, that is going to be different for all of your subjects, but it's just something to pay attention to. And maybe in your other subjects, the marks are different, but knowing how to approach each type of question is massively going to help you. Sources, use them carefully. Geography generally has a map or a photo or some kind of source. They're not going to give you those just for fun. They're there for a reason. And finally, before we get started, diagrams are always welcome in EDUCAS exams. They love diagrams, so feel free to chuck them in. I think diagrams lend themselves really nicely to coasts because you can draw your little longshore drift diagram, or you can draw a cave arch stack stump sequence, whatever. So just remember that. Now, in terms of options, we're going to leave it completely up to you. We've talked about this as a team. The one-to-one conversations are going to take hours and hours and hours and hours, which is fine because they're really important and they need to take priority. We are not going to have much time to do marking, but that's not to say you can't send us them, but you just are going to need to be patient with us because we are going to be really quite busy in June. But yeah, do them, send them to us, or plan them, or leave them for now, or maybe form some nice little geography study group. And anyway, lots of flexibility, but we do at least want you to look at some questions, plan them in your head, that sort of thing. If you'd like anything marked, yeah, by all means, send it to us. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in huge amounts of depth. Just to show you quickly, I've got a little bit of advice about every single question on this Word document. So it's in the Coast folder and it's called Coasts Exam Questions. But, right, page 63. You need the map on page 64. But in case you find that map a bit confusing, I've included a satellite image of the same area, which might help you. And if you're still a bit stuck, then if you search on the internet for a town called Wells next to the sea, it might help you answer the question. Right, so the first question, use figure 1, which is on page 64, but in these strange circumstances, obviously use other sources as well if you need to. Use figure 1 to suggest, that's our command word. Suggest means you don't have to know, just use your geographical common sense. What might be the reason? Suggest what choice of shoreline management strategies might be used in boxes A and B in light of the principles of cost-benefit analysis. Right, so the shoreline management strategies we've got are hold the line, managed retreat, do nothing, and advance the line. Cost-benefit analysis tells us whether there is something worth protecting or not. And if you look at boxes A and B on page 64, box A basically is this area here, and box B is here. Think about what is worth protecting here and what is worth protecting here. Okay, now this is a 5-mark question, so go back up and have a look. Oh, right. I just answered the question. I haven't got to think about anything. I've just got to try and find 5 things to say. All right, 6 or less. The number of marks you get will reflect the number of different points you make. Okay. 1A part 2, got the same command word. With reference to figure 1, but thinking of changes that could affect coastlines globally, i.e. don't worry too much about figure 1 at all. So just let's think about coastlines. Suggest, you don't have to know, use your geographical common sense, why there is likely to be an increasing need for shoreline management. Why are we going to have to do more management of coastlines? Can we think of what we know that's going on with the sea at the moment? Oh yeah, sea levels are rising, aren't they? And then you could take that idea and maybe link it to tides and storm surges and all of those other things. I've given you way too many clues. B, these questions are quite unusual for your exam board, but occasionally you'll get just tell us what this means, define this, and that's what 1B is. Question 2, you have to use the resources on page 65 this time. They haven't photocopied brilliantly, but you can see everything that you need to. So, the thing about 2A part 1, examine to what extent the coastal dynamics differ. There's quite a few commands there. What I'd like you to focus on is the idea of difference. So you need to look at Klaipeda and Kaliningrad. That's my best attempt. Page 65, and think about what are the graphs telling you that makes them different. All right, the map might be helpful, but remember, we've just got to try and find 5 things to say. That will do. 2A part 2, suggest 1 reason why rates of coastal erosion vary. That's a very small little trip hazard. Lots of people know loads about coastal erosion and why it varies. If you start going off on a long rant, A, it's not worth it. This question is only worth 2 marks, and B, they only want 1, so they're only going to give you marks for the first one you mention. All right, just a little trip hazard. 2B, describe. Love this command. It's the simplest command. It's just say what. Describe 2 ways, little trip hazard for you, stick to 2, in which coastal sediment is transported. So I think you need to choose the 2 that you could explain, sorry, I'm lying, 2 that you could describe the best. So longshore drift would be a good shout. You could talk about traction, you could talk about suspension, you could talk about the wind and sand dunes. Doesn't matter, pick 2 that you think I can describe that in lots of detail, and then try and say 3 marks worth of stuff about each one. Not too bad, is it? And then of course we have a choice of 15 markers. Remember, when we get to 15 marks and above with your exam board, you always have a choice. which is nice because you can play to your strengths and ignore the question that you don't like. So you have a choice of 3 or 4. Evaluate. Okay, evaluate is to kind of weigh up something. So if you're evaluating the importance of something, you're saying how important is deposition in comparison to other stuff. Now, clearly we're talking about depositional landforms. Deposition is important, isn't it? But let's think about this. If your sediment is being deposited, what has got to have happened to it before then? It's got to have been eroded from somewhere. It's got to have been transported. There might have been some weathering along the way. So yes, of course, deposition is important, but it's not the only thing that needs to happen in order for a depositional landform to be created. So quite a tricky question, but the more you practice looking at exam questions, honestly, the easier it gets, which is why I probably go on about it too much, sorry. Question 4 is harder in my opinion, but that's only my opinion. To what extent is one of my favourite commands because there are 3 possible answers, and those are completely, not at all, partly. To what extent are you fed up of being in lockdown? You might say completely, partly, not at all. To what extent are you glad for the weather? Completely, partly, not at all. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't have to be a geographical question. There are always 3 possible answers. So we know in geography that we are going to be heading to the answer partly, because if the answer isn't partly, there's not really much to say. So if you ever see that command, you kind of know what your conclusion is going to be. But to what extent has a fall in sea level, so that could be the land going up or the sea going down, modified the coastal landscape? Now that's trickier because it's about sea level change, it's about emergent coastlines, it's about all of that stuff. But some of you possibly might prefer it. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go through every single exam question, but what I've tried to do for all of them is just give you some clues so that you can at least have a sense. Also, on page 74, there is a really badly photocopied satellite image, so you've got a much nicer coloured version. If you still think that's pretty poor quality, and you may well, if you have a look at page 74, it actually says satellite image of Cap Ferret and Arcachon Bay, Aquitaine, France. So get onto Google Maps, find that place, zoom in and have a look. So always feel free to do that if you wish to. So as I said, going back to the beginning, you've got various options of what you may wish to do. If you do want to send them for marking, great, but can you just be patient with us, please? We are genuinely happy to look at them. It's just it might take longer for us to get them back to you than usual, that's all. So, yeah, like I said, we're going to have a Coasts Q&A soon. So any questions that have come up from the exam questions or the test, or maybe you've been catching up a little bit over half term and you're thinking, I really don't understand that, make sure you tell us what those questions are so we can address them in the Q&A. All right? Okay, folks, thanks very much.